and specifically romantic relationships, and it doesn't really encompass all the shades of grey. So it's basically two people that really like each other and then would form some kind of a sensual partnership. So that's essentially what it is. Doesn't really matter who those two people are and what their persuasions are. Typically on an energetic level, we don't really see so much. What kind of bond it is on the external, the physical doesn't really matter so much on these readings, and it is more about the interaction between them on other levels. So how they get along, how their communication is, very much about the union and the intricacies of it. So what we can also see is we can see the representation of the energy in and the energy out. If you look at the mannequins, you'll see there's a small stream of energy and there's a large stream of energy. And then we can ask and see the direction of it on our reading screen. And we can see, okay, well, the big energy could go out from one person to the other and a small stream coming back, meaning that the person does a lot and gets little in return, or they can do very little and get a lot in return, meaning that the person that they're with are giving them quite a lot, but they're not really giving so much energy to that person. And then also we can have a look at the nature of energy between them. What we can see here now is that we've got like a representation of color. So we've got like different colors. So for the one energy, we've got the bigger energy, we've got blue energy, for the other one, green. And then, of course, we can ask, what is the representation of this color? What does blue mean? What does green mean? Green can very much be associated with the heart. Blue energy can be associated with healing. The one person can maybe have a very healing kind of a component that they have for the other person, where that person gets healed from their presence, and they could very much feel that the other person has a very big heart connection with them, reciprocating in some way with that. And we can also have a look at those energies and say, well, what does it mean for the couple? And we can see how those energies move between them. So we can see, okay, well, also ask questions, really ask questions about how the energy moves. We've done where we play around with different scenarios, so we can put them in different scenarios and see, does the energy change if this person is removed, if they go further away? Maybe this person travels a lot. Okay, how does the energy change? Could be that the persons communicate better when they over a long distance, and when they're in a closer proximity, they don't communicate well. Or dynamics could change depending on situations that change, and this can give them some kind of a perspective of, okay, what actions do they take, and what generally happens in the relationship, and then how does that affect the energy between them? How does that affect the give and take between each person? We can also see what the response is to a person's energy, so we can see, okay, well, what does the person do, and then how does the other person reciprocate? Oftentimes, we can get that two parties join up together, and the one person is very much focused on them, and that person is focused away to other things. So it does happen where one person is in a relationship with another person, but the interest lies elsewhere. They're not that present in the relationship, where the other person is very present in the relationship and one is not. You could have that both people are overly present in the relationship, that's all they ever do. They're basically connected to each other all the time. They basically miss everything outside of themselves, maybe some opportunities or some options that they could have. The next thing that is very important between people that are in a relationship is that, and this goes for many different relationships, there's always each person's path, and then there's the collective path of both of them. So when people join up together, they then have some task or some shared interests, and those shared interests have a certain characteristic to them, and they also have their own task or their own interest. So what I've shown here is that the one person is very much focused on the interest, and they've got a very straight line forward. The interest of both of them together kind of wavers, so it goes more towards the one person's interest, or more towards the one person and then towards the other, and then back to the one, which is I would say fairly healthy. And then you would see the other person, it that person basically more and more starts to invest into the relationship. So could be that this person really buys into the relationship. Maybe there's kids involved, and this person takes more care of the kids over time, or you know, spends a lot of time on their communal home, maybe doing repairs or maybe doing alterations. Maybe this is part of the person's hobbies. So you could have things like that happening where one person really has a dedicated path for themselves, and they join in with the relationship because the relationship benefits them and the other person, and the other person puts a lot of effort into the union and the shared interests. So this is really a give and take. I'll go more sort of what dynamics we're looking for, and how we can look at what's balanced and not next. Okay, this is very much something that I look for in relationships. I look in relationships. I look at the shared interest as a pool, it would be like a bank account, and then it would be what the person gets from it. So what they get from the relationship and what they put into the relationship. What we ideally want to see is something like this, where people put into the relationship. So yeah, people put more into the relationship than what they take out. And the one person takes out at one point and the other person takes out at another, and then at different times they pour their energies into the relationship and add their component to it. What we don't want to really see is that one person puts in all the time and the other person takes out all the time. So if both people pile a lot of interest into the relationship as well, and nothing pays out to them, they don't really get something back. So say, for instance, they work a lot on the relationship, but there's nothing really coming back to either of them. This could be a very peculiar type of situation. Maybe it's people that are very dissimilar, people that are not matched up together. They have this joint life, and that joint life doesn't really fulfill them on any level for either of them, and they could go along with this for a great length of time, and ultimately it couldn't pay back to either of them. So this is something that does happen. We could also have that both people want something from the relationship all the time, but they're prepared to put nothing in it. So they basically demand a lot from the relationship, so demand from the other person what they don't want to give, and then they basically almost like draw out too much from the other person. And then we could have that one person puts in and the other one takes out. So I like this dynamic because it goes together with what I've heard from psychologists, where you get a healthy relationship that is built like an H, where both people have their directives, they have their path they walk, and then they've shared interest, and then those things need to be balanced. So if you don't really get something from the relationship, you still have your own path, but then you have your shared interest with that other person. So that person puts time into you and your efforts, and you put time into their efforts, and they can stand on their own really, and they can really be self-sufficient. I think one of the things in relationships that is really tough to comprehend is that people find their own happiness. A relationship doesn't offer happiness to anyone. Happiness comes from yourself. It comes from you wanting to be happy, and then doing the things that satisfy you. I had this discussion once and said, happiness is very tough because you have to figure out what makes you happy. And then once you figure out what makes you happy, you vocalize it. You start to bring those things into your life. And the thing is that if you have the other person in a relationship that understands what makes you happy and understands what you need more of, provided it's not another person, well, that person can then attribute to that component, and you could have more happiness. So it goes about a whole lot of steps about understanding what that is, identifying it, really vocalizing it, and then both people buying into the concept of, okay, well, I need to do this in order to help you find your happiness. And I think that's a very healthy situation, especially if it goes both ways. So I think if one person focuses on their happiness and the other person does not focus on their happiness, but they focus all their attention on making the other person happy, and they're not happy themselves secretly or knowingly, then it becomes a real problem. So we want in everything We want balance, and we want balanced energy exchanges. We want a balance between the shared interest of a relationship. We want balance of the path of the people that they're walking. Oftentimes, one person will sacrifice a lot for a relationship, and then they would not necessarily get something in return. So it's good to understand what people need out of the relationship, and then also what they're willing to put in. It does happen often that people do have a skewed view of relationships. It's they look very much about their things that they want for themselves, but it's not that the other person assists them in getting it. They get it from that person. They basically take from that person and make themselves happy. They basically remove time from that person's day, make themselves happy, but then they don't really put the time into the other person. And this is where we have this bucket of shared interest. The way that I say it is that when one person makes deposits into the bank account, another person draws it out all the time. You end up with an empty bank account, so an empty relationship. When both people put into the relationship, you get a relationship that can pay out to both people at any time, and then you get a healthy relationship that's and very much similar to a bank account. If you have your money in the bank account and you have a task for that money or task for whatever you pile energy into, that can then pay out when it's full. But if there's nothing to give, there's nothing from anyone that they can put in or they can add to someone's life, then there's nothing really, no returns on it. So it becomes really tough to deal with those kind of situations. So this is a very interesting dynamic, and one that I find is very helpful with relationships. Along with the energy exchange, we can basically see, what people's tasks are for themselves, how much they have for themselves, how much they have for the other person, how much they put shared interest in, and then we can see how that balances out in the end. I really feel like this is a really good reference model of what to look for. So something that we can use as a tool on our reading screens in order to see what the relationship is like, together with the energy exchanges between the people.